Welcome back to the news at 10. Let's cross over to Abuja now. Here's Gloria Umezuke. Gloria.
Hello, Joma. Good to see you and welcome to the nation's capital. The House of Representatives Committee on Communication has summoned the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, the Minister of Communication and the Executive Vice Chairman of the Nigeria Communications Commission, NCC, over the recent 330 billion naira agreement reached on the fine imposed on communications company MTN. The committee reached this resolution after meeting with the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Communications and representatives of the NCC, whom the lawmakers said were not in a position to answer their question. The minister's members say they cannot understand why the fine was reduced from 1.04 trillion naira to 330 billion naira. Our correspondent Larry Lasisi reports.
The news broke late last week that the federal government has reached a settlement with the communication company MTN on the 1.04 trillion naira fine imposed on it by the Nigerian Communication Commission over unregistered SIM cards. That settlement has led to this meeting by the House of Representatives Committee on Communication. Present is the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Communication and representatives of the Nigerian Communication Commission. The chairman of the committee reminded those present that the committee was investigating the initial reduction of the fine.
NCC was reported to have reduced the initial penalty of about 1.04 trillion to 78 billion naira, thereby constraining the statutory revenue assertion to consolidation revenue funds of the Federation.
The committee wondered why negotiations had continued despite the House investigation. The Permanent Secretary gave this explanation.
The inaction or the Simon impasse on the matter, which was credited to the ongoing investigation by the committee, was not correct. We were told that the action of the committee is independent of whatever action the executive branch may want to take on it, and it should not be predicated on the outcome of the committee. We believe that clarification was made very clear in that session, and it is indeed in the public domain.
The explanation did not satisfy the lawmakers.
And one asks, are you not setting a precedent where anybody in the sector can flout the laws and then pull us through lengthy negotiations and you reduce to 70 or 60 or 50, whatever?
With my motion, I moved that this honorable committee summon the Minister of Communication and the Executive Vice Chairman of NCC to appear before this honorable House next week, Thursday.
This motion was immediately approved. The committee made it clear in a previous meeting that it was against any reduction of the original fine. This settlement, as agreed to by the executive, is one the lawmakers will want to follow up on. Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, has been explaining why the Commission freezes the accounts of suspects that were investigated or are currently being investigated. A statement issued by the head, Media and Publicity of the EFCC, Mr. Wilson Uwojaren, says freezing of accounts suspected of being used for commission of financial crimes is a mandatory investigative step backed by law. The statement adds that Section 34, Subsection 1 of the EFCC Act 2004 empowers the Commission to freeze any account suspected of being used for financial crimes. According to Mr. Uwojaren, the intent of these provisions is to ensure that the Commission safeguards suspected proceeds of crime pending the completion of its investigation. Well, residents of Asaba, Delta State capital, woke up to see the streets flooded as a result of a heavy downpour that affected major roads and making vehicular movement very slow and nearly impossible. For some residents, it was quite difficult to enter their homes as they claim that the floods have taken over their houses, while other road users, their cars were brought to a halt owing to the damage the flood may have caused their cars. Now that's it from the nation's capital. It's over now to Adeshowa for business news.
You first. First Bank.
Thank you, Gloria. Welcome back, everyone, to Lagos. These are the stories that making the business headlines this hour. The federal government total revenue for the first quarter of the year is 1.26 trillion naira, 18% lower than the preceding quarter's receipts. According to the Central Bank of Nigeria's economic report released today, gross oil receipt came in at 666.13 billion naira, lower than the fourth quarter of 2015, owing to fall in income from crude oil and gas export. Non-oil receipts, on the other hand, fell 16% to 602.46 billion naira. The federal government's total expenditure was 1.23 trillion naira, resulting in an estimated deficit of 725.18 billion naira, as against the 2015 quarterly budget deficit of 260.25 billion naira. Foreign exchange inflow and outflow through the CBN amounted to 3.98 billion and $5.85 billion, respectively, resulting in a net outflow of $1.87 billion, while foreign exchange sales to authorized dealers amounted $4.67 billion. The Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, has announced plans for the inclusion of Capital Market Master Plan into the nation's medium-term expenditure framework. The minister, who disclosed the plan at a meeting with members of the Capital Market Master Plan Implementation Council, says the policy will help reposition the capital market towards economic growth and job creation. The Nigerian equities market opened the week on a bearish note. Sell-offs continue across major counters. For more details on today's stock performance, here's Harriet Agbing.
The Nigerian equities market started the week on a negative note as investors continue to trade cautiously. Investors in 3,406 deals exchanged 152.32 million shares valued at 2.29 billion naira. The all-share index shed 0.47% to end the session at 27,103.31 with a market capitalization of 9.30 trillion naira. Now, FBN Holdings was the most actively traded today with 40.04 million shares. It's trailed by other bank stocks, FCMB and Zenith Bank. 15 stocks recorded gains as against 23 losers. Champion Breweries was top gainer, up 5.90%, while on the other hand, Unity Bank, Owando and Honeywell Flour Mills were the top three losers. Those are the day's trading figures. I'm Harriet Agbinyi.
Thanks a lot, Harriet. And the massive sell-off continued for major global bourses as investors look ahead to this week's Federal Reserve's and Bank of Japan meeting, the upcoming UK vote on the European Union, and concerns about the world's economy. Now let's take a look at the final numbers. That's business news tonight. The news at 10 continues in a moment. I'm Adeshowa Josh.
You first. First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Adeshowa. The Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, Aisha Abubakar, has called for more investors in the cement industry. The call came after she paid a visit to see the start-to-finish production of cement at the Dangote cement factory in Obajana, Kogi State. Mrs. Abubakar also acknowledged that the federal government's diversification plan hopes to encourage more investors into the industry.
The Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment on her first official trip to the Dangote cement industry in Obajana, Kogi State. She's flanked by Engineer Joseph Makoju, the special advisor to the president of Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, Mrs. Abubakar is taken through a guided tour to the various units involved in the production of cement, which has an over 13 million metric tons production capacity per annum. At the quarry, where the limestone, clay, and other raw materials for cement production is sourced, the Assistant General Manager in charge of the crusher unit, Sani Salisu, tells us the required process.
After blasting the limestone from bigger size to smaller size, it comes here at maximum of 1,200 by 1,200 millimeter. So when it enters into the hopper, it goes to the crusher. This is the primary crusher. It crushes it into maximum of 300 millimeter size, 300 by 300. Then it goes to secondary crusher.
The 9-kilometer conveyor belt drives the broken limestones to this point where it is further crushed. Next is the visit to the powerhouse, the ICT unit, where the robot certifies the quality of the cement production before it is finally bagged. After having an aerial view of the cement factory, the Minister of State and her host gave their impressions.
We have the policy roadmap for cement, and Nigeria is self-sufficient, but different uses for cement are coming up, so definitely we have to improve the production. So there's room for more investors in this sector, and we need to encourage more people to come and do the same thing.
The power to drive the plant is such a critical input that you do not want to take any risks with it. So a very fundamental part of the initial planning is to provide for our own captive power. And we have a power station here, 4 units, each one 45 megawatts, a total of 180 megawatts natural gas fired.
Formerly known as Obajana Cement PLC, it metamorphosed and had a name change to Dangote Cement PLC in July 2010. The Obajana Cement plant is reputed to be one of the single largest cement plants in the world.
Still ahead on the news at 10, Nigeria's Tigresses come up short against Belarus in women's basketball Olympic qualifying tournament. That's on sports. Stay with us.